Revelation of A.S.H. Chapter 6. The Voice Within. Quinn Shalom Phillip. 10 days after the Revelation Night disaster. I was dreaming. I was laughing as I went to the school bus. I loved school. I loved 5th grade. I loved my friends. I loved that we lived in the Tennessee mountains with its lush green forest. Most of all, I loved that we no longer lived in the dusty heat of Texas with its mean people. As I skipped down the long drive to our cabin, I didn't care that we couldn't watch TV or turn on a switch to have lights. The forest and the mountains made it all worth it. Today is my 10th birthday, and it was turning out to be the best day ever. School went by fast, but I was so surprised that Mom didn't bring the cookies we decorated last night for my class. I wondered if Dad's old truck had broken down again. I would just bring the cookies tomorrow. Mrs. Pence, our bus driver, and Mom's old auntie gave me a bright green bandana and wished me happy birthday as I got off. Green was my new favorite color. I rushed up the drive to the house. Mom promised to make my favorite cake for dessert, pineapple upside-down cake. I got a cold feeling as I rounded the curve to the house. The door was open and smoke was drifting out it. I couldn't hear anything except the crickets, whippoorwills, and myna birds. I ran as hard as I could to the door. Mom was laying on the kitchen floor. Smoke was coming out of the oven. She was covered in blood. So were the counters and walls. Her face was almost unrecognizable. Her body had cuts all over it. I rushed into the bedroom I shared with my baby brother. Bo was still in his crib, his throat cut. I began looking for Daddy, screaming for him. Out in his woodshop, he hung from the ceiling beam. He had the same cuts all over his body as Mom, but he was naked. He looked like every bone in his body was broken. I heard the bus crest the hill and knew it was about to pass back by, so I ran as hard as I could. Mrs. Pence barely got the bus stopped as I ran in front of it. She hurriedly came with me to the house. When she saw, she took me back down the mountain. As I sat in the police station, staring at the blood on my hands, the police told Mrs. Pence and I that my daddy killed Mom and Bo, then himself. I knew it was a lie. The mean people from Texas killed them. My mom's auntie knew it was a lie too. And the next day we left for another place with mountains called Virginia. As we drove, she patted my hand. Now, Shalom, I want you to listen very carefully. There are things, people in this world that are very dangerous. Your parents were running from them. And if they know you are still alive, they will find you. If anything happens to me, you have to keep moving. Your mother was my great niece, and that makes you the last of my family here in America. Never tell anyone what happened yesterday. If they ask, tell them your parents died in a car accident when you were a baby and you grew up an orphan. Never forget, sweetheart, the monsters in this world are real, so keep running. I woke with a start. I was alone with my memories. My great-aunt Judith died 4 years after my parents in a home invasion, or so the police report claimed. I found her too. I had a nervous breakdown, started hearing voices, and was put in a foster facility for juveniles with mental problems in Ontario. After I recovered, or rather escaped, I began running and ran for 6 years until I met Kenneth. I was working at a cafe in Colorado, getting ready to leave for my summer trek around Europe. He came in every day until I left. One day I heard a commotion in an alley in Berlin. A man shouted for help in English, so I ran to help him. It was Kenneth. He was pretty beaten up, but when he looked up at me with those intense Nordic ice blue eyes, I knew I wanted to look at them for the rest of my life. Now I would never look into them again. Opening my eyes, I glanced down at my hands. They were covered in blood. His blood. I jumped out of bed and rushed into the bathroom, scrubbing my skin raw. I don't want to be crazy again. A nurse opened the door. "Are you okay, Mrs. Phillips?" I'm fine. I just had to go to the bathroom. I didn't mean to bother you. You must be busy. I'm sorry." I tried to sound as sane as I could. The voice in my head was urging me to leave and leave now. This person wasn't to be trusted. The nurse smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh no, it's okay. I'm not too busy for you. Do you need something to help you sleep?" No, I just woke up and needed to pee. I'm really tired. I'll probably just fall back asleep." Answering with a nervous laugh as I climbed back into bed. "Sorry to bother you. Good night." "Good night, Mrs. Phillips." She watched me for a moment before leaving. The voice in my head was now shouting that something was very wrong, and that I needed to get out of this place now. I was about to get out of bed when the door opened, so I laid very still, breathing slowly. I felt the covers pulled away from my arm, and the cold swipe of an alcohol swab ran over my shoulder. Just as she pinched my arm, I grabbed her wrist. She was strong, but I surprised her by kicking her in the stomach, then stabbed her with the needle. In a moment, she fell across me unconscious. Shaking and terrified, I stripped her and put her in my bed. Then I put on her clothes. Covering her completely, I stood trembling at the door and gathered my courage. She had dark hair too, and I hoped no one paid attention to her face as I opened the door. There were unfamiliar guards at the end of the hall. I nodded as I went to the nurse's station. I pulled my own chart, but instead of writing anything, I took all the pages. I stuffed them into a handbag that was on the floor under the desk. I didn't recognize the guards, so I prayed I could slip past them. Sliding the ring off my thumb, I dropped it in my pocket. There was a pack of cigarettes in the bag. I took it out, thankful that people didn't take care of their bodies. I walked straight to the elevator. The guards barely spared me a glance as I waved a pack of cancer sticks at them. The elevator stopped, and 2 guards got on, so I got off. Walking through the unfamiliar ward looking for the stairs, I saw an elderly lady trying to get out of bed. Another pair of guards were walking toward me, giving me the eye, so I stepped into her room. "Oh, honey, I was just going on break. What can I get you?" I said as sweetly as I could. My voice said the guards were watching me and to keep acting like a nurse. I put the woman back in bed after helping her to the bathroom and gave her a sip of water. I glanced at the chart at the end of the bed, pretending to write something until my voice told me the guards moved on. She fell asleep, so I quietly dug through her bag. I felt bad about pickpocketing the old lady's keys, but I needed a place to hide until I could figure things out. She was having hip surgery tomorrow, so she wouldn't be home for at least a month. Her address revealed to me that I was in Oklahoma City, 10 hours from home. When I came out of the room and started back toward the stairs, the 2 guards were standing at the nursing station, still eyeing me. "You're not from this floor," one growled. I rolled my eyes at him as I told the nurse that room 214 was trying to crawl out of bed, but I got her settled after taking her to the bathroom. Then I asked if they had any coffee and creamer I could take back up to my floor. "We're out again," I explained in a grumpy tone. "I said—" "I heard you, dumbass. But if you want us working extra hours every night, the nurses need coffee, and we're out upstairs." I snapped at him, trying to act like the actress I had seen on Nurse Jackie. The nurse behind the desk grinned at me as another pulled some stuff from an area behind the door. "Don't mind him. He's an ass," she glared at him. "Then maybe he should be over in proctology," I snarkily added, and both nurses laughed. The rude guard looked pissed as the other smirked. "Thanks for the bean juice, ladies, gentlemen. Ass." I held up my head as I walked toward the elevator. If there was one thing I learned in my years living off-grid, it was to act like you belong and people will think you do. Then you can get away unnoticed. On the first floor, I was just walking out the door as the guard barely glanced at my stolen ID. I saw a bus coming and ran to catch it. The change in my stolen bag paid my fare. The driver was nice enough to tell me how to get to the old woman's address. To him, I was a nurse getting off work who promised to check on a patient's cat. He talked about his grandkids and how he was leaving on vacation as soon as he got off in the morning. I wistfully claimed I envied his 2 weeks camping and ice fishing. I wished him luck as I got off the bus. A few blocks later, I let myself into the elderly lady's condo. I couldn't believe I had gotten away so easily. I almost started laughing out loud. It was like something from a spy movie, and I wanted to fall asleep on the couch. But I knew in a few hours someone would discover I was gone. So instead of sleep, I poured myself a shot glass of whiskey to fortify my courage. The old lady had stainless steel shot glasses with planes on them. It was peculiar, but it kept the whiskey cold without ice. She had pictures of herself as a pilot that looked like they went back to World War II, and most recently, one that looked like it had been taken a few months ago with a daughter and great-granddaughter perhaps. As I looked through the memories of a long life, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I wanted to cry. Everything I would never have now was preserved on her wall in celluloid. I choked on the whiskey in the steel shot glass as it slipped past my trembling lips. I felt like I was breaking down as my heart began to pound. Everything started to spin. I sank to my knees, trying not to succumb to a panic attack. I hadn't had one since the kids were born. The voice in my head kept telling me to try to breathe slowly, to relax, when all I wanted to do was run from the pain in my heart. I don't know how long I sat there, but the voice in my mind insisted I needed to get up, so I did. Maybe I'm crazy again, but at least I'm not alone, I thought to myself, and the voice within laughed. I took a few changes of clothes, some food, water, and the old lady's whiskey stash. Piling them into my benefactor's very nice luggage, my voice reminded me of something Molly said about werewolves being able to scent each other. So I Febrezed myself. I was grateful to whomever invented the scent-neutralizing spray. I was surprised to discover the old lady still owned a plane and had it parked at a small municipal airport. I decided to go there, grateful that one of my boyfriends before Kenneth was a crop duster. No one noticed as I drove out of the retirement community 2 hours before dawn. The small Cessna was clean and obviously well maintained. There was a picture on the dash: grandmother, mother, daughter, granddaughter, all sitting on the wing grinning. I felt bad for taking the plane, but I needed to get home quickly. Something Kenneth said in his last moments had nagged me since I woke up. Something went wrong with the program. They tested it against my recommendation. I needed to find his notes. I needed to figure out what he was really working on, because whatever it was, it killed him and our children. It was noon when I landed the small municipal airport only 10 miles from my house. I was grateful that Colorado's bipolar weather melted the snow off the runway. I flew only 200 feet above the ground the whole way, hoping the terrain would protect me from any radar. The air was freezing as I refueled the plane with a small hand pump, just in case. The voice reminded me of something I had said many times, something I learned in the mental hospital from another patient. Just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean someone isn't out to get you. Paranoia is a good thing. Paranoia will keep you alive. I took a car from the road. It was just sitting there with the door open, keys on the ground next to it, and half a tank of gas. I saw no one as I drove to my home, only the dead. I parked behind Kenneth's Jeep. The door was still open, his laptop case and carry-on still on the back seat. I carried them inside and dumped them on the table in the foyer. Kenneth was exactly where I left him, his blood frozen, his body laying on the rug in our dark, cold house. My children were laying in the family room covered in sheets. Someone moved them. Perhaps Gerard and his people. As I looked at them, I realized where I'd seen those kinds of wounds before. It felt like I'd been standing in the same place, looking at the same scene over and over for my whole life. I couldn't seem to breathe as the realization dragged me down. Near sunset, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table at the bottom of a bottle of Walker Red. I had seen this thrice. The monsters that killed my children and husband were the same monsters that killed my parents and baby brother, and later my aunt. My voice responded, "We can be monsters too." I knew I should have kept running. If I hadn't stopped when I met Kenneth, he would still be alive. I was surprised I was not completely blackout drunk as I staggered into the living room to be with my family. I wanted to bury them, but the ground was still frozen. The voice in my head said the monsters would know I was here if I did. In a tearful, desperate moment, I tried to take off Kenneth's wedding ring, but his frozen finger wouldn't release it. The grotesque graying of his once creamy skin had me vomiting in the kitchen trash bin. I wondered how my life got to this point. I had a good life with him, a normal life. Running just seemed pointless when he promised to keep me safe from the monsters of our world. Now he was gone, and I was a monster. Out the kitchen window, I noticed brown spots on our white fence. I couldn't stop myself from sliding the glass door open. I tossed the bag of vomit into the composter, turning around slowly, the brown spatter on the fence, on the walls, on the windows, and on the taupe winter grass was stained where we once laid. The only place where the snow remained held the color of my family's death, dark red. I couldn't stop the sobs and shaking as I bore witness to my family's last moment written in our blood. Even my bloody handprints pawing at the greenhouse door were still there. The screams that I made were more like anguished howls, but they were my keening as I grieved. I wanted to die. My voice reminded me of what Kenneth said. Something went wrong with the project. I fell asleep in our bed, surrounded by Kenneth's smell, and praying not to wake up in the morning. That night, I dreamed over and over about the night my family died. Then about the evening, Kenneth tried to explain his work using M&Ms. I woke restless and disturbed. When I woke up again, I dreamed about my giant brown beast running through the mountains, carrying a red bundle with a baby in it. Next, Chapter 7.